Always look underneath a car before you buy it. My very first car I got in a trade for a motorcycle. I was a motorcycle guy when I was a kid, and I still am. I rode one here. And that was because in Florida, when you were 15 years old, you could ride a 5-horsepower motorcycle on the street. Independence, freedom, a license by yourself, not with your mom sitting next to you. And so I always had bikes. My generous dad got me one. And this is a motorcycle story, but it's interesting because I first had a Yamaha 80 that really was probably about 5 horsepower. And then I got a Kawasaki 100 that was way more powerful. It was a G5, rotary valve, 100 enduro. And to this day, I know that somebody lied. They told the state this thing was 5 horse when it wasn't, which was great for me because it would go 50 or 55. And after a couple of motorcycles, I would drive my dad's cars, occasionally my sister's. I had a cool sister, Judy, who had a couple of cool cars then, like a 914 with flares. And, but I wanted my own. So I made a deal. I had a Honda 450, really bad custom with pullback handlebars, which I still hate, and a total 60s or 70s custom paint job. And I traded it for a Fiat 850 Spider. I learned many things from that Fiat 850 Spider. This was in 1974, let's say, 74. The car was probably a 70 or a 71. So think about that. This car was only 3 or 4 years old. Today, we're almost to the 2018s, so it's like a 2013 or 14, right? Okay, I get the car. The top is shot, completely shot, but we're in Florida, so I always run it with the top down anyway. A Fiat 850 Spider had the most wonderful, what would you call a metal tonneau cover. You lift up this metal cover, fold the top in, put down the cover, and it's beautiful. It hides it, it's perfect. And in a pinch, that rear area could be a seat. We went on a couple of double dates with me and Jennifer and Bob and Julie in the back of a Fiat 850 Spider, which is a car which is shorter than a VW Beetle. Tiny car, but it's rear engine. So the engine was in the back. So there was a little tiny back seat, and the top would fold down in there, but today it was raining. Not long after I got the car, it had a cool set of 60 series Goodyear bias plies on it, which were a big deal at the time. And they did them by letters in those days. Would have been like a C6013 or something. Vintage guys could tell you. Anyway, I'm driving through heavy rain. This is in Florida, tropical downpours. I hit a big puddle. The top's up, but there's not much of a back window. And suddenly, I'm just covered with a wave of water. It washes over the back of me like I was standing in the surf and not looking. And I'm wet. And I'm like, what in the world just happened here? And I pull over and I'm looking, and the interior, I'm soaked. The interior of the car is wet. The top is fine. I can't figure out where it came from. When I got home, I looked underneath it. Always look underneath a car before you buy it. This was one of my many lessons when I was 16 or 17 years old. No floor. The Spider's a convertible too, and they often convertibles have a cross member to give them more strength. Cross member was no longer an X, it was a V. Half of that was gone. The back half of the floor was gone, probably because of that tattered top that the guy never replaced. It had a nice paint job on it, but no floor. They had put a piece of plywood and just laid it on what was left and put carpet on that. And the back of the floor was still there because it was kind of dished. So it was a scoop. When I hit the big puddle, big enough, the water caught that scoop, went right up into the car, and literally did wash over me like a wave. And another thing that happened with that Fiat was the police actually came to my house and talked to my parents. They said, there's a guy with a green sports car and a sports car hat, like old school MG sports car hat, zooming around the corners in Indialantic, Florida, and we think it's your son. And I looked at myself, and I've got the sports car hat, and I've got a green sports car, and I go around corners pretty good. But I'm thinking, I don't go crazy. And about, I don't know, a week or two later, I saw a guy in a green MGB with a sports car hat zoom around the corner. I'm like, no, that's the guy, that's the guy. That's why we have courts of law. It was amazing. But one more thing about that Fiat 850 was that it was the car that I drove that had the most things wrong with it at one time, ever. Let me see if I can remember the whole list. One, the muffler had broken and fallen off. That was before I had a pipe welded onto it, and I used one of the mufflers my sister took off of her Sportster. My cool sister, who had the 914 with flares. That was before that. It had no muffler, and it wouldn't idle. Something was clogged in the carburetor, or not right in the carburetor, probably a vacuum leak. So when I pull up to a light, I had to rev the throttle a little bit to keep it running with no muffler in a little sports car. Vroom, 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 vroom. It had no brakes. It had just enough hydraulic pressure to turn on the brake lights. So I used the regular brake pedal for brake lights and stopped with the handbrake, which still worked. On top of that, it had a slipping clutch, pretty badly slipping clutch. And so when I pulled away after revving the engine, the revs would be relatively high and loud. Just, you know, when you have a slipping clutch, you have to be real delicate with the throttle application and find that point of friction. Because if it starts to slip, it only gets worse, right? So it always made the people next to me think I was trying to race them in a Fiat 850 Spider, which, by the way, was rated at 54 horsepower, as I recall. But you know what it did do? It ran good. It did run good. Let's see, that and no top. And I shouldn't have been driving it. Well, and no floor and no frame. I don't know what held that car together. But I used to do, before my time, drifting with that car. But it had to be dirt because it didn't have enough power to do anything on the pavement. That Fiat 850 probably saved my life a lot of times because I was a young male. And going around a corner, I knew I had to floor it and the car would slow down from the cornering force, right? So you'd enter at 50, floor it, and it would go brrrr. So we would go bombing around a corner with all four of us in the car, power sliding that Fiat 850 Spider, making a racket and having a good time, and we got away with it. By the way, when somebody's sitting in the back seat, you have to leave the top cover up. Oh, and one more about that Fiat 850 Spider. I'm a motorcycle guy, right? Two more. This is a long one, sorry folks. Two more. One, I had a dirt bike. It was a Kawasaki F11 250. It was a pretty nice bike. And I wanted to go riding with it at the trails. And the bike wasn't street legal yet. I eventually got a tag on it, put lights on it. But this bike, no tag. So guess what? I put a board up against the side of the car. I rolled the bike up the side of the car and into that area behind the seats, which is this wide. And the front wheel went behind the passenger seat, and the skid plate sat on the side of the car. I think I put something there, but I know I scratched up my paint. and the rear wheel hung off the side. And I drove to the dirt trails with it that way. And then last story about my Fiat 850 Spider. I had that car when I went to the American Motorcycle Institute. Before I went to college, I'm an official, professionally educated motorcycle mechanic. 3 whole months of education with AMI. And the way I figured out to carry the bike now, because that wasn't practical, I wish I had a picture. I mean, the bike was huge. It must have hung way off the side. It was crazy. Kids, me especially. And we could be here all day. What I did was, I had one of those motorcycle bumper carriers where you put the wheels in it and you hang it on the bumper of our 73 Polaris station wagon. Well, those were still in the garage. So I took one to a welding shop and I had them make me a steel bumper, just angle iron for the back of the Fiat, and then weld that piece straight onto it. So I put the front wheel of the bike into the bumper carrier, tie it down to the sides, undo the chain. I can go anywhere. I took it all the way to Daytona that way. But one day, I was sitting in the rain at the grocery store, waiting for somebody to come back out, and I got that bad top up. I can't see through the back window, and I'm just sitting there minding my own business, and I see somebody out of the corner of my eye walking behind the car, and then the whole car shakes, and I hear, oh! That wheel carrier stuck out that far. And whoever it was, they didn't see it. And they must have creamed their shin on that thing. Oh, I was too embarrassed to get out. I got small, like, no, nobody in this car, nobody here. I apologize for that. If you're out there, I apologize.
As a luxury and exotic brand dealer, you know the challenge of putting the right price tag on perfection. Ritz Garage places you directly in touch with our qualified network of new and used dealers with no auction fees. Ritz Garage. Premium cars, premium dealers without premium fees.